Things we've been doing in the first half of the day is getting stories to be told about what NATO has meant, about what the changes have meant. We heard from a former Romanian foreign minister. We heard from a former Slovak diplomat about what it was like being 24 when the revolution took place in Czechoslovakia, as it then was. Now let's go to Afghanistan. And we're joined by Zafar Hashemi, who was a refugee. He was a young refugee from Kabul. He fled to Pakistan at a young age. What impact did NATO have in his home country? Zafar.
So normally, warp and weft is considered to be the two basic components of weaving. But for me, as a 13-year-old refugee kid in Pakistan, inside the humid and hot carpet-making factories, along with the iron beams of carpet-making handlooms, were similar to bars of a prison. Because that prison was imposed on me. It was not by choice. 6 months before that, before entering to that factory, I was forced, along with my family and over 1 million other Afghans, to leave Afghanistan in and around and after September of 1997 because the Taliban took over Kabul city, which I used to call home. And we were joined by other 2.5 million Afghan refugees already in Pakistani cities, villages, and refugee camps. The hardest part was not that I had to put 13 hours a day for a wage equivalent to 15 cents a week for 5 years, or the fact that tolerating that 13 hours a day in a malnourished body of a teenage boy, or the fact that I could not go to school because I couldn't afford it and I had to work during the day because I needed to feed my family. I always and constantly felt humiliated to admit the fact that I could not go to school to my peers and friends. But the harsher reality that was hitting me the most was because I was deemed in derogatory terms as a mahajir or a refugee, and was deemed and seen as a social burden in Pakistan, and was used as a number or a pawn or a political chip in the bargains of political turfs and politics in Pakistan and at the UN assistance meetings. But worst of all was to see my country, Afghanistan, being torn into pieces day after day as a result of war, revolts, fighting, and rifts among different groups, including communists and the so-called jihadists, and everyone in between. Fast forward to 2002, and as a result of US and NATO intervention of Afghanistan, I found myself back in the classroom along with over 6 million other kids who were deprived of education for the past years. And we, as a generation, a new generation of Afghanistan, had a lot to catch up in a very short amount of time. The young generation, which is 60% of the Afghan population under the age of 25, were quickly able to seize all the opportunities, despite the shortcomings, despite the questionable approaches of post-intervention in Afghanistan, were able to use opportunities and do the things that were deemed unprecedented in its nature in the history of the country. And instead of a kid stuck inside Pakistani carpet factories with no voice, I was able to become a journalist, to cover the historical inauguration of the first African-American president in Washington, D.C., become the spokesperson for the Afghan president, and be a voice for the country and the government, and work in the lobbies of Congress for issues and about the issues that I care deeply about for my both homes, Afghanistan and the US. And I think that attests to the transformation, a generational transformation that is happening in Afghanistan as a result of the US and NATO intervention. Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome the Executive Editor of Defense One, Mr. Kevin Barron.
Thank you very much. Zafar, thank you very much. And also with us now, joining us, is Álfrún Baldursdóttir, who's a political advisor to the NATO Senior Civilian Representative in Afghanistan. So this is our little dedicated Afghanistan time for the day. You'll be hearing from a veteran of that conflict later on, and it'll pop up throughout the day. But I thought it was notable that this is about it. This was not the case in NATO 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 18 years ago. It's been a long conflict. And so just to set up a little bit of this discussion, which is supposed to be about human security and a little bit about NATO's future, what's about to happen there, I'm sorry, Afghanistan's future. I'm the executive editor of Defense One. We cover the military. We've covered the wars. We're on the hard security side, the side that a lot of people think may be coming to an end soon, or at least sooner than people thought until recently. No one's sure yet. But I'll tell you this, on our website, we get a lot of op-ed commentaries, probably from some of you in this room. Almost all of them are about what happens when the troops leave and how soon it's going to happen, or why they shouldn't leave yet. There's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of angst, and a lot of it is, about the security of the country, about the future of the government, the security of the region. Some of it is about the population itself and the civilians that Álfrún deals with there as well. I'd refer to one of our writers, Gail Samak-Lamone, who has a lot of experience back in Afghanistan, is one of the few to point out that there are good news stories if you're focusing just on the hard security story and you think that the metrics are not good. Security is very bad in the country in a lot of places and a lot of metrics. You should also look at some of the non-military metrics. If you're a woman in Afghanistan particularly, if you're a child, it's a lot different today than it was 15 years ago, than it was 10 years ago, than it was even 3 years ago. So Afghanistan is a fluid place, I try to remind people. With that, we have a very short time before our next period. So Álfrún, tell us about your role in Afghanistan now and what you're seeing when you interact with the civilians today.
So I'm a political advisor focusing on women and youth. And I think human security is the key for the future of NATO in Afghanistan, because we have to transfer from looking at purely hard traditional security in Afghanistan at times like these when we're in peace negotiations to consider more facts, to talk about political, civil, social, and economical rights. It's very important, and therefore it's an important time now to shift from traditional security in Afghanistan to human security. And that's really much what I'm hearing from Afghan people. And it's not only a NATO-led initiative, it's an Afghan-led initiative to build a sustainable peace in Afghanistan.
So what are you hearing from the people you meet with? You're meeting with ministries, you're meeting with NGOs, organizations, small groups, individual people?
Yeah, and students in Kabul.
Is it hopeful? Is it fearful? What's the sense for the future?
A lot of them are hopeful, but they're also afraid of losing a lot of rights. and they're afraid what will be the future, and especially women. And there's a lot of women that are really afraid of their future and are trying their best and are doing a fantastic job in Afghanistan to push for women's rights.
Zafar?
Yes, I think it's important to understand that the determination on the international community's part that there has to be a political solution. There is this understanding in the Afghan society at any level that you go. But the concern is that at what cost? Because the price tag has not been set or cleared yet by any stakeholder in the Afghan peace process. If we're to deal with the Taliban, if there is going to be a settlement, there has to be clarity along the way, because Afghanistan of today is not what it used to be. There are changes, there are specific boundaries and limits that the Afghan people cannot go back and say, we don't want that. And just as a reminder to those who are bragging about or trying to sell that the Taliban have changed, go and check out the social media feed, a video of 3 days ago where in Nuristan province, they found a group of women who were having a party or dancing and singing within the confinement of their own houses. They were taken out and beaten and lashed in public. So there is no difference between the Taliban of 1996 and 7 and today. But there is a difference in the attitude of the Afghan people that we do not want to go back. And that has to be addressed if there is an effort, if there is a hope for a sustained peace in settlement in Afghanistan.
Yeah, and I want to build on that. And I think if we want to build a sustainable peace in Afghanistan, the peace negotiations and the process has to be inclusive. We have to include women in the process. And they have not only to have a seat at the table, but there have to be a meaningful participation of women. And I think that's the only way to build a sustainable peace in Afghanistan.
If someone in the audience wants to raise a hand, ask a question, I'll try to get you in. We're a short session, and we have 5 minutes on the clock, so don't be shy. Shoot your hand up. Not to put you two on the spot, you don't speak for all of NATO or NATO members, but again, in this moment, what kind of future does human security have if there's a withdrawal that begins? Is that something that stays? Does NATO stay in a civilian role that's non-military, or is that not how it works? This has got to be hand in hand, from your understanding.
I guess that question is a bit above my pay grade. I definitely think that we have to continue thinking about security in Afghanistan, and we cannot just leave and create a power vacuum. And human security covers that. It's not just about troops. It's about economy. It's about social rights. And it's about human rights.
I think it's important to remember why we went to Afghanistan in the first place. I know there is a fatigue of war and questions about the objective of going in Afghanistan at the first place. But remember, it's about values. And also, it's about how foes and friends are watching Afghanistan and the US and NATO mission in Afghanistan. If we were to abandon Afghanistan, it could have global consequences. So there has to be, regardless of peace or political settlement in Afghanistan, there has to be assurances that the values that the NATO forces took NATO forces to Afghanistan and made them fight alongside the Afghan forces are secured and are not compromised.
Well, so a lot of Afghanistan's future depends on what the United States government decides, which I think people often forget depends on what the American people decide. And a lot of what Secretary General Stoltenberg has been doing has been trying to sell NATO to the world again in a new era that people may have taken for granted. NATO needs a little bit of selling to populations. You've spent a lot of time in this country in particularly. Do you think the American people get it, what you're trying to say, that even if there's a pullout of any kind, that there is a security that needs to be extended that's beyond just military presence, that there is an American interest to all the things that you're saying?
remember in 2014, there was all these scenarios that Afghanistan is going to collapse and everything that we have built over the years in the country is going to go in vain. But that proved to be wrong because since 2014, up until this moment that we're speaking, Afghan security forces are in charge of the country's security. Yes, the attrition rate is unsustainable. There's a lot of civilian and military casualty. That has to be remembered. But remember, there has to be a way to find out that whatever the blood and the treasure that has been spent in Afghanistan is not just gone in vain. It's a lot of money, it's a lot of blood, not of just the Afghans, but also American bloods and our NATO allies' blood. There has to be a way to sustain that and build upon it. And the people of Afghanistan are not asking for continued NATO presence in their country, but are asking for ways that they could be in charge of their own countries. I don't think any country in the world wants to have foreign troops in its soil forever. And Afghans are no exception to that.
So, Alfie, so back to you on the same kind of a question. This field of human security that you're a part of, you wanted to speak more largely to. Where do you see its future when you think of NATO's future?
I think human security is key to NATO's future because member states seem to have a different view on security, and there doesn't seem to be a shared security culture in NATO. Some member states favor hard security and traditional security, whilst other member states favor development aid and diplomacy. And I think that human security can breach and build a bridge between those member states. So I think human security is the future for NATO.
We're in our last minute. Is there any kind of generational divide? I mean, you're both fairly young for this room, for a lot of NATO rooms that I've been in. Is there something to that you both come into this panel and not wearing uniforms into the other part of NATO's mission?
I think democracy, human rights has always been core values of NATO. We just live in different times where we are thinking about security in different ways, where security is connected to human rights, and we have to continue that on that way forward.
Well, thank you for sharing your stories, especially from Zafar. Part of what they're trying to do here today is to put these personal stories of what the NATO alliance has meant to individuals throughout its history. We're at the end of our time. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the afternoon, everybody.
All right, thank you.